IVM.
We would like to thank Storytel for sponsoring this show. Storytel is an audiobook platform that lets you hear hundreds of thousands of stories on your mobile, on your PC, wherever you prefer. You can get a great deal by signing up at storytel.com/IVM. But before I tell you what the deal is, let me make a recommendation for you for your first book. When you go to Storytel, search for James Clavell. He has a number of books, but I'm going to recommend Shogun to you. Shogun is the story of an Englishman who's shipwrecked in 16th century Japan and how he struggles to deal with the culture, gets embroiled in the politics of the land. It's a great story, and if it wasn't enough that you can get just this one book, James Clavell's Asian Saga has 5 more books on Storytel. So go to storytel.com/IVM. You can get your first month at 99 rupees a month instead of 299. That's 200 rupees off on your first month. Storytel.com/IVM. Go check it out.
Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, social circles, WhatsApp groups, everywhere we all are talking about the 2020 roundup. From romantic to romanchak, all sorts of stories. And why not? This year totally deserves our attention. But some of my favorite lockdown stories have been the stories of small personal impact. We all have heard of those numerous people who selflessly felt inspired to help someone around them. Our guest today has a similar story to share. Welcome to Absolutely Right, the first graphology-based podcast show in India. I'm your host, Aditi. I'm a graphologist and a high-performance coach. On our Wednesday episodes, we invite people from different walks of life, and instead of asking them questions, we discover their story through their handwriting strokes. From childhood, I felt mesmerized not by what people did, but by the reasons behind their actions. I always wondered, why do they do the things they do? Handwriting analysis, also known as graphology, gives us some accurate psychological insights in that reasoning. It creates a graph through the strokes people unknowingly choose in their handwriting. Today we will be joined by Ankit Vengurlekar, who is the India managing editor of LinkedIn News, host of a podcast called Love Aajkal, and a smitten cat parent to Tofu and Mizo. Ankit and I first spoke when he supported our anti-anxiety social drive in the month of April by creating awareness on Instagram. Being a social media influencer, he uses his platform wisely. In July, he started an interesting and inspiring project with his cook Didi in Bangalore and voluntarily promoted it across platforms to support her work. That is one of my favorite stories of personal impact. I'm going to ask Ankit more about it. But before I get Ankit on board, a quick reminder. Make sure that you have your notepad ready. No, not to make the notes of all the wise things we say. Technically, you can do that too, but to check your own handwriting as I analyze Ankit's. I always describe traits and strokes and the psychological reasoning behind it. You might have some of those strokes in your handwriting and you may learn a thing or two about yourself. As you listen, check out our new segments, Autograph Please and the Graphology Tool of the Week, where today I will be speaking about the anti-New Year resolution stroke in your letter Y. This Y letter is the reason why the writer struggles to complete not only resolution but basically any task given to him. I'll talk about it as we get there. Ankit will join us on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. One more reminder, people, please go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and help us out. It will take you a couple of minutes to fill out this survey, but it really is very, very helpful for us. For the people who do fill out the survey and are willing to drop us their email address, we're going to do a special drawing and send out some IVM swag to everybody. So please do help us out with that. But what a week it's been on the network. There's so many things to talk to you all about. Let me run through some of the biggest highlights really, really quickly, right? So Sanjay Jha was on Cyrus Says. What an incredible conversation. I mean, I can't say enough about it. Check that out. We had Hansal Mehta on Maruk Inayat's Note talking about 1992 scam. Amazing stuff. We had Vishal Gondal talking to Nikhil Advani about his career in film. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet spoke to Gunjan Arya, the CEO of OML, and Samiksha Unyal from Bacardi about the history of NH7, the Weekender Festival. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav had an amazing episode about the Bushmen of Kalahari. Begin the Journey, Ashish Vidyarthi talks about career choices. On Nankari, they talk about cake. What a fun show that was. And on This Round is on Me, we had Dr. Sanjay Arora talking to Gauri about Suburban Diagnostics Company and what he sees as the future of healthcare in India. And for our Tamil speakers, if you haven't been checking checking out Sivakami and Sabatam, why haven't you? Please do go check that out. Kavita's doing an amazing job telling that story. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
Hi, Ankit.
Hi, Aditi. Good to see you again.
Really? I've been looking at your Instagram posts, and you're one of those few people who really enjoyed the lockdown.
Oh my God, that can be misconstrued in so many ways, but all things considered, yes, it's been a good year.
I was just in talking about your project with house help that you have. Can you quickly tell us about it?
Didi's Kitchen, July of 2020, just immediately after the first lockdown, we decided to start cooking delicious Mangalorean and Karnataka style food. Saroj Didi has been working with me in my home for the last 1 year, and bahut gazab ka swad hai. She's got a fantastic mastery in cooking, and the joy of social media. It can be a really torturous place, but it really came together. And in the couple of months that we ran Didi's Kitchen, we did a turnover of close to 2 lakh rupees. In only a couple of months, I rented a separate 1 BHK where orders could be just cooked, etc. And involved her entire family, including her kids and her bhabi. So it was quite an enterprise.
Incredible. Thank you so much for inspiring so many people. And I've been seeing how other people also picked up this idea and implemented it quickly with home cooking and kitchen for their house help. So thank you for doing this. This is incredible.
Thank you.
So Ankit, let's look at your handwriting and signature that I have in front of me.
I'm feeling very nervous.
So now I already have the sample. No point feeling nervous right now. It's almost like your result is out and I'm just going to announce. So.
Okay. Looking forward to it.
So first thing that comes to my mind is, the way you write if I asked you to write on a blank sheet of paper, and as you started filling the paper, you wrote it to the end. Almost we call it margins in the handwriting connotation. When you fill the margin, you go all the way to the end of the page. And for most of it, it talks about your risk-taking and adventurous nature.
Wow. Really? I mean, just writing to the margin can...
Yeah. And because, we gave you complete free canvas and freedom to fill the space. And you chose to do that in a way that you fill to the last point. And that's what risk takers do, right? They know they can exit at any moment, but they don't. And they wait it out and they wait for that last moment to shift things and to try that last probably a possibility that they are thinking about. Now you have done a lot of that.
Wow.
You're smiling. I take it as yes. And because of which people, when they try to work with you and understand you, and even friends and family members, they don't understand. Otherwise, you're so logical and you're so analytical. And what comes to that point? What happens to you where you suddenly jump into a situation and you take risk?
Interesting and also quite true. Very true. Good job. Wow. This is bang on. Wow.
So when we look at the analytical nature, okay, let me talk about that. When people write with angular formation, which means when you connect your letters, one letter to another, or sometimes when you write your letter M's, there are pointed angular formations there. They clearly talk about your need to analyze information. You're highly observant, and wherever you get into a space, you keep looking for small cues, for those moments where people miss on things, but you read between the lines almost all the time. You do not even know that you're observing these things until somebody would ask you a question. Ankit, what do you think about it? And the very moment they ask you that question, you bring in almost like data files from 15 different sources, and then you talk about, say, that person, that activity, that situation. But it happens. So the analysis, it's a way you think, it's the way you process information, it's how you look at the world, and thereby the processing is happening naturally at the back of your mind. So it's not that you're judgmental, it's not that you're consciously looking at things. You might be browsing through internet or a newspaper maybe, but the way you process information, that is your style. Now, why am I talking about it is because so many times people think analytical thinking is what one should cultivate, and it's a good thing or a bad thing. Now, it's not about that. It's literally how you are gifted with certain ways of, all of us have our natural ways of going about. In your case, this is your natural thing, and tell us more how it has actually translated itself in your work or your personal life.
Well, in work, I can definitely connect the dots or read between the lines, as you said. Being a journalist is all about literally connecting the dots. And maybe sometimes a story is hidden in plain sight, but you're looking in the other direction. And so you miss out on these details. So I think I've been lucky, or I've been fortunate that I can naturally use my natural disposition of analytical thinking for better storytelling or for better journalism. And is this common or is it not? Because I do find myself at a loss of words sometimes where I'm like, this is so easy. How did this not occur to you? I mean, what are you thinking? Are you not paying attention? You know what I'm saying?
It's nothing to do with attention. Even when people pay attention, they do not have the analytical bend of mind. And this is where things become different. I'll give you the hindsight of the same trait. When you deal with emotions, especially other people's emotions, you bring in a lot of logic and analytical thinking. And you do that even to yourself. You're like if you feel something, you probably write it down. You try to bring in logic there. You say, okay, I felt this is a trajectory of my thoughts, and let me just evaluate it. And people are like, no, they're emotions, you can't be evaluating it. And
what is up with that statement? I'm like, okay, problem, solution, ways to get to the solution, point A to point B, locomotion. And in personal life, it's especially like, no, this is an emotional situation and it doesn't need your logic or your analysis. But I'm like, sure, but you just articulated what seems like a problem. And to my mind, there's a solution to a problem. So very logical journey, right?
Or there should
apparently
be one.
Apparently not.
Ask me. For me, it's all about gray areas in my work. So I totally understand the confusion people must be feeling being around you. But yeah, there is no way to make it easier for you. I'm so sorry.
Oh my God. I was just going to ask you that. How do I pepper it down? Oh my God.
Logic, no, but probably you got to, and I think you have done that. As I look at your writing, one of the things you cultivated over the years is your listening skill. You really refrain yourself from talking. Not that you don't wish to, but you genuinely make attempts not to give the solution until and unless people do not ask you for a specific solution. I think that requires a lot of patience on your part. That's not natural whatsoever, but you've kind of figured it out.
It's definitely not natural to a Sagittarian. Definitely not. And it's also something, I think the older I grow, the deeper my understanding is of the kind of virtues that my parents tried to instill in us as kids. Back then it was just like, what do you mean patience? Like, what? But
why would you wait?
Yeah. Now as one grows older and one has one's own kids, one realizes, so this is what they were talking about. And I think the older you grow, unless one is really listening in today's day and age of everyone screaming at the top of their voice with hashtags and OOTDs, it can be deafening, no? It can be really deafening. So at times, listening is also self-preservative.
I think so. But in your case, it is also your way of allowing the other person to know that you respect them. Because I'm going to bring in another aspect here quickly about your writing is...
How can you tell all this from my writing? All of this you can tell from my writing. What is this sorcery?
I'm just getting started, Ankit.
Oh my God.
So handwriting has around 800 permutations and combinations. So if you start combining them, and if every person shows some of them, it becomes a poetry. You can literally understand deeper nuances of your behavior. So many times people ask me, in this situation, what do you think I do? and where's the confusion. And one can really sit down. It's completely mathematical. You can sit down and you can analyze and talk about what exactly this nature will choose as a choice, in that
Wow.
moment. It's beautiful. It's just like the subject is so beautiful. I think more I learn, more every time I look at a sample, I think it's a privilege, and also it's so beautiful to look at how human mind can function. I think that's so beautiful.
Wow. Hats off to you.
No, I think the subject. So, one of the things that you always did very well is to have a clear idea of where you want to go. Whether people liked it or they did not like it, you always have 3 to 5 years kind of range of plans, and you go and you execute. More than execution, I would say you go and you experiment. And I think that is so crucial to your behavior. And I have spoken about this trait on the show many times. When people write their small letter T and they cut it, like the horizontal line is around 50% or slightly above in that range, it talks about your end result orientation. So the very moment you bring in your project in front of you or any idea, you're like, okay, but what are we looking at? Now look at this, okay? And combine this end result orientation with your logical thinking. So you don't want to wait. You want to pick up like 5 logical aspects to go about it and quickly get to where can we take this? What exactly we can learn here? Now, if I have to talk about in last few years, if you look at your own journey, you feel that you are being more impulsive over logical in your own mind. You feel like, okay, I wish I can have more control over what exactly is happening in my life, but that is not happening. For whatever reason, the choices that you have made, the impulse has taken over, and that is slightly confusing for you. When you look at these situations, you're like, I never behaved like this. Why am I behaving here differently? Which is something that you can ask questions around if you want to. Oh, over to you at this point. Over to you.
But there's also the bit of risk taking that you said by, running towards the margins or towards the edge and seeing, okay, how much can I pull off? If anything, I think I'm slightly risk averse or more risk averse than I'd like to be risk positive with respect to life choices. And is there something with respect to that in the handwriting?
I feel that, okay, I'm going to now step into something which is slightly intimate or like something, personal for you, but
Sure.
we can just attempt, okay? I feel around 6 years, 7 years ago, there's something that you did, which according to you did not materialize the way you wanted to. And that was one decision that made you change the way you look at your relationships, life, and especially personal life differently. That has caused you to be risk averse. So as a person, you're not like that. But this decision or that one experience, how sometimes people go out of their ways to choose a business, and if that doesn't work, then suddenly anytime they think of new business ideas, they're like, okay, let me evaluate it 5 more times.
Yeah, you're bang on. 7, 8 years ago is when my marriage failed, and that didn't work out. And that was a massive, massive emotional blow. And I'd like to think it's fully behind me. But is it ever really, I mean, something
No,
like that in life? It never
like
really
I have
is.
gone through a divorce. I totally understand. I don't think it is ever behind you.
Yeah.
You always
Yeah.
evaluate situations from that lens for sure.
Correct. And I guess you just become a masterful person at coping better, right? That's what you do. But I think because that time period that you're saying, that may be something that has had a bearing on how I think and how I operate, maybe.
And there is a distinct shift in which you changed after that, and all of us
Oh
do.
God,
But in your
yes. Oh yes. Oh
in
yes,
your case,
absolutely.
what has happened distinctly, if I have to, and this is no prediction. I'm really looking at the way you have filled the paper. So we look at, if you whatever age that you have. I didn't ask you your age, but if you have to look at that as a timeline, and if you have filled the page in a sample, you kind of evaluate it. That's what I'm doing actually. It's as simple as that. So when we so risk averse is one thing, or probably withdrawn from risks, and your evaluative way more for your emotions, not as much as your logical thinking here. But at the same time, what has really changed, I think what is changing in this 2020 is you're really getting your bearings back. You're like, okay, I did this and it was my way of looking at things. But this 1 year, I think you have used very well to get certain things cleared in your head. You're actually jumping into some new possibilities or risks for that matter, and you're willing to give it a shot for sure.
Wow. Blows my mind how you can tell all of this with my handwriting. No, but you're right, Aditi. 2020 has been, and I feel extremely guilty in admitting this, considering how millions have struggled, millions have lost their lives, and millions continue to struggle. But, I really thank the universe. 2020 has been such a positive year for me. And a lot of that has been also because of certain interventions or certain steps that I took. Because the environment wasn't necessarily positive, but it's what you do given the circumstances, the decisions you take, the people you associate with or collaborate with, that has had a world of a difference. So personally, professionally, physically, emotionally, I can't think of a year more significant to me than 2020. For the entire world, there is life before 2020 and life after 2020. I find the headline is similar for me as well, but I think the parameters or the paradigms are very, very different.
I can imagine. We did lots of social initiatives, mental health social initiatives in this year, and around 2,000 people have become part of the community, and a lot of work happened. And so many times I turn back and look at this year and I feel all that I've learned, all the, training, graphology and otherwise as a coach, I feel it was almost like for this 1 year so that you can apply all the knowledge and you be available for people who are looking at things differently. I can't agree more.
But you've done so much amazing stuff yourself in 2020. I think there is an Aditi before 2020 and there's a post 2020 Aditi. I mean, this year has been transformative, cathartic, so many things for so many creative folks like us, right?
Yeah, completely. And I also feel like when I looked at people going through something that was really, really tough, I always worked around anxiety, but I never knew how tough it is for people until we reached this point. So the stories, I feel, keep you going more than anything else. So the next segment here is called Autograph Please, where I will be talking about how people misunderstand you looking at your signature. So signature talks about your public image. How the very moment you want to step out of the house or we get into formal situations, we speak different, we behave different. Our body language naturally gets into something that otherwise we don't do when we are at home. So that all is captured in your signature, and your handwriting talks about who you are. And all of us, no matter how identical the signatures are to our handwriting, we always have that one extra angle, that one extra stroke that is different than your actual writing. And that gives away the information about how different you behave in situations which are uncomfortable social situations. So I'm going to give you my ways of looking at it. It's just kind of a thing that you can tell me some examples or some, probably experiences that people have told you later that they thought about you in this manner and then they learned about you something else. Okay. So in public, especially not in personal life, but in public, if people try to throw authority, or if they are arrogant, you become very defiant. You either say go to hell and walk away, or if you can't say it, you quietly walk away, mentally saying go to hell. I don't want to be party to the stupidity and I'm just gonna deal with it and whatever, I'll deal with the consequences. Or at times you do rile people up if need be. But defiance is definitely what you do.
100%. I mean, it couldn't be true. Also, I think the older you get, last year, I think I read this book by Mark Manson. I'm sure you must have read it or people must have mentioned.
I think all of us have.
Everyone, right? And more than, learning something new, it was the reading the book was literally like, oh yes, this is what I'm feeling, or this is what I wanted to say, and you've just articulated it in those words. But I feel the older one gets, the less bullshit threshold one has. So, and in professional life or in personal life, when somebody just assumes a place of authority, not out of humility or learning, but out of just sheer entitlement. That's the word, right? I'm sorry, but no, the 2020 Ankit will just not take it sitting. Also, because I think the world we are living in, wrongdoing needs to be called out very clearly. And too often, bad people, bad actors, predators go unchecked just because people think, छोड़ ना यार, रहने दे, चल ना जाने देना यार, क्यों पंगा लेना है? That typical Indian attitude, right? Like, let it go, shove it under the carpet. Yep. But I can't see myself being comfortable with that anymore, whether on social media or in real life. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So Ankit, the only thing I would question is why 2020 Ankit? This Ankit is known to people around you all along. Like, this is 2020, you just made it more pronounced. But this Ankit existed like probably 20 years ago. So that's nothing new about it.
I think everything that happened this year really acted as a reminder of getting really, really true to yourself. I mean, for the first time, I was sitting, and for days and weeks, I'm having conversations with myself about my own death and what I think my legacy can be potentially. And coming out of those weeks and days of personal dialogue, one realized the tweaks and the trimming and pruning that one needed to do to one's life, whether it is in terms of people, experiences, time spent on things, issues, whatnot. And so, which is why, as weird as it sounds, I'm glad that the pandemic happened. I'm glad that the world went.
I know where you're coming from. It's just like, right. We needed that pause.
Yeah, I mean, not glad from the, I'm Thanos and I want to destroy half the population of Homo sapiens.
We don't know. Let me check your handwriting for that.
But I mean, I would be in favor of that as well. Hell, I'll even go and volunteer as long as all the cats and dogs and all the species of animals
Look at that.
and forests stay safe. Human beings are the virus. It's not corona that's the virus.
Sure.
So, yeah, I just think this year gave a lot of clarity and the time.
Sure.
We've told ourselves this lie that we don't have time to talk to ourselves. But this year just showed us, what a bullshit excuse that is. Because, we could finally give time and put structure to our day. But really, I'm really thankful to everything that happened in the environment, without sounding sadistic or anything like that, for this inner dialogue to have happened.
So one thing that as we are on the autograph and signature conversation, I feel what people do not understand about you most of the time in personal and professional life, because you're very forthright and you say what you believe in, they do not understand how adjusting you are and how considerate you are as a person. I think in most relationships, it has taken a long time for people. So it's a good and bad thing. I feel probably you being considerate is kind of inclusive, so inclusive that they don't even realize that is happening. And there is a lot of disappointment because of that. And I'm saying this because in your signature, the way you write your signature, I was just confirming that with you before we started. There's one long huge letter A and the entire surname is written within it. Now, when you do that, when you actually have only your initials as your signature and you don't write Ankit as a whole name, you literally dedicate your time and energy to make sure that people around you are taken care of. But that is not understood by others whatsoever. So there is a huge gap between how people understand your motives and what exactly you do. Something for you to look at, and we, whether we like it or not, all these misunderstandings are our doing. So all this projection that we make is how you communicate, and you think you communicate, but people do not feel that that's the messaging there. So definitely for you to look at in 2021.
That's fantastic. It also reminds me something of what my mom keeps telling me. And it's very similar to the observation you made. I do put a lot of people before me. It's gotten much better now, but
Yeah.
it used to be debilitating. It was bizarre. It was self-destructive.
I
Fortunately,
agree.
not that bad anymore. But yeah,
So, Ankit, last question. If you have to take one thing from 2020 and make sure that you carry that in 2021, what will that be?
wow, that's a loaded question, Aditi. I really think I would take compassion from 2020 into 2021. As the calendar and the clock turns, we are not suddenly going to be new, better, improved people. The world is suddenly not going to be new, better, improved, corona
Sure.
free. But I think if there's anything this year has taught us, it is that we've got each other and we've only got each other. And
That's true.
if we've got each other's back, we can get through absolutely anything. Absolutely anything. The human condition
Well
is the
said.
most remarkable ever in the history of the universe because we can have each other's back and we can work together and leave aside every perceivable, every conceivable difference, right? Just because we are one race and one species. And when we address it that way, we can do remarkable things. I mean, the least of which is an example of record time for the coronavirus vaccine to be developed and a
Sure.
truly international collaboration, right? So I believe I am otherwise quite pessimistic about humanity, but I believe our compassion and kindness has really instilled me with a lot of hope this year. And I really look forward to taking that forward in 2021.
Thank you. Thank you for that message. And I feel so beautiful to look at the compassion as the most important message here. And I agree with you. It's so nice. Thank you, Ankit. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for all this conversation. And thank you for being vulnerable to the feedback that I give you. Thank you.
Of course, of course. Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure. And Happy New Year to you.
Oh, Happy New
And
Year. Yes.
hope you go from strength to strength and make this much bigger or wherever
Thank
you want to take it.
you. Thank you. What did you learn from 2020? Which quality, lesson, or habit would you like to carry with you in 2021? I know carrying on with routines, habits, or even resolutions is not everybody's cup of tea. Let me talk about one particular stroke that makes it really, really tough for the writer to complete any task. He or she loses interest 50% down the road. They get bored, feel uninterested, or even trapped, and they feel they cannot drag their feet anymore. This particular stroke is simple to understand. Every Y letter has a loop, a tail, lower extension, or that lower part of the stroke, we call it lower zone. If that loop is incomplete, which means the stick comes down but never goes up all the way, then the stroke shows inconsistency in execution for the writer. If your boss has this stroke, then that means he loves to solve problems, but he will delegate the execution part to you suddenly at the random moment. So be ready for some new work at any given point in time. If your friend has this stroke, then he would get super excited to plan trips and events with you, but will not be very helpful when it comes to implementing those ideas. And if your spouse has a stroke, then be ready to follow up with him or her over and over again. Small tip. Please, please, please don't take it personally because they are not trying to do it to you. The lack of interest in execution is nothing to do with their lack of interest in you. I'm saying this very clearly from my personal experience, a lesson that I've learned a hard way. Now, in either ways, make sure that you do it yourself, get it done from someone else, or be really, really patient to follow up. I've mentioned this stroke in today's fun sheet. Download it from aditisurana.com/podcast. Look for episode number 85. The next episode falls on 1st of Jan 2021, and I will be talking about ways in which you can rediscover yourself in the coming year. There's so many things we can do to really know the deeper aspects of our personality. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode. If this episode or show has impacted you in any way, then be the first one to create the impact on others. Look at someone's handwriting and see how you can be of any help to them. If you like this podcast, then don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on IVM Network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Let's connect next year on 1st Jan 2021. Till then, happy writing and Happy New Year.
Working Monday to Friday glued to your chair making you feel dull? Worry not. Get your 5-minute weekly dose of travel around the world with postcards from nowhere. Join me every Thursday as I explore the strange, obscure, and fascinating parts of the world and bring out facets of travel you may not have thought of before. You can find us on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.
जिंदगी डायरीज के पन्नों में कुछ पुरानी यादें, समुंदर किनारे झूमते दरख्त, जवान दिल की धड़कनें और अनजान मुलाकातें हैं। तो आइए खोलिए मेरे साथ जिंदगी डायरी के पन्ने और साथ ही खुलकर जीते हैं जिंदगी। आप सुन सकते हैं जिंदगी डायरीज IVM पॉडकास्ट ऐप या वेबसाइट पर, या जहां कहीं से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो।